Is Wicked for Good a flop? And if so, why? The question sounds premature, almost unfair. After all, Wicked, for Good, the second half of Universal's two-part adaptation of the beloved Broadway musical, hasn't even had the chance to fully prove itself yet. But Hollywood history is filled with films that were technically successful on paper and still culturally labeled as flops. Not because they failed financially, but because they failed expectations. And that is where Wicked, for Good, may find itself in trouble. To understand why, we have to look beyond box office projections and dig into momentum, audience psychology, franchise fatigue, and the risky creative choices surrounding the Wicked film experiment. The weight of a two-part... Hollywood has tried this before. Sometimes it succeeds, as with Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. More often it backfires, as Part 2 carries responsibility. It must justify the split, escalate emotional stakes, and deliver a payoff so powerful that audiences forgive the feeling of having been sold half a story earlier. If For Good feels like an extended epilogue rather than a cinematic necessity, audiences won't call it bad. They'll call it unnecessary. And unnecessary films are the most quietly damaging kind of flop. Musical fatigue is real. One of the uncomfortable truths Hollywood doesn't like to admit is that musical fatigue exists, especially among general audiences. Yes, Wicked is a cultural phenomenon on Broadway. Yes, the soundtrack is iconic. But the leap from theater audiences to global movie-going audiences is not automatic. Musicals thrive on intimacy, live performance energy, and suspension of disbelief that film audiences don't always extend so generously. The Ariana Grande effect, a double-edged sword. Casting Ariana Grande as Glinda was a marketing masterstroke and a long-term risk. Grande brings enormous star power, a massive fan base, and genuine musical talent, but she also brings something harder to manage: audience projection. For many viewers, she isn't Glinda. She's Ariana playing Glinda. In Part 1, that novelty works. Fans are excited just to see her in the role. By For Good, novelty wears off. Performance scrutiny intensifies. Any emotional beat that feels underplayed or overly polished risks pulling viewers out of the story. Meanwhile, Cynthia Erivo carries the heavier dramatic burden as Elphaba. Her performance must anchor the film emotionally. If the audience subconsciously compares the two, not as characters but as celebrities, the imbalance becomes a distraction. Films don't flop because performances are bad. They flop when audiences stop believing. A story that gets less fun. There's another structural problem no marketing campaign can fix. Wicked gets darker in its second half. The humor softens. The spectacle narrows. The themes turn political, moral, and tragic. Elphaba doesn't win. Glinda doesn't ride off triumphant. The wizard isn't toppled in a cathartic climax. Instead, the story interrogates power, propaganda, complicity, and sacrifice. That's bold storytelling, but it's also commercially risky. Modern blockbuster audiences are conditioned to expect resolution through victory. Wicked, for Good, offers something more adult and ambiguous. If viewers leave the theater feeling emotionally heavy rather than exhilarated, word of mouth suffers. And word of mouth matters more for Part 2 than opening weekend hype ever will.
What do you think young Cynthia could have learned from Elphaba?
That she was alright as she was, that the things that she was keeping to herself were special, and that they only made her more her. I'm glad I've come to it now, though.
If I could ask you, Ariana Grande Butero, how has Glinda changed you for good?
My goodness. I think she has given me a new strength and ability to listen to certain voices maybe I wouldn't listen to before from my inside, you know? That ability to trust myself. I think I maybe coming into this experience was a little bit of a recovering people pleaser. And I think that Glinda, in the most graceful way...
The box office math problem. Let's talk numbers. Not exact figures, but expectations. Because expectations are where this story actually lives. For Good, the rules are different. It doesn't get a clean slate. It doesn't get to introduce the world or benefit from novelty. It inherits the weight of the entire gamble. Every dollar spent on the first film quietly raises the bar for the second, even though audiences don't think in cumulative budgets. They think in box office weekends and headline comparisons. And here's the trap. If For Good earns less than Part 1, and statistically most sequels do, it will immediately be framed as a decline, not a failure in absolute terms, but a failure in momentum. Studios rarely emphasize long-term returns or combined profitability. Media outlets don't contextualize sunk costs or franchise math. They compare opening weekends and final tallies. Audience drops for Wicked sequel becomes the narrative, even if the film is solidly profitable, even if it outperforms dozens of releases that year, even if it justifies its existence on paper. That's how flop narratives are born, not from bankruptcy, not from empty theaters, but from comparison, where anything less than escalation is treated as collapse. Cultural timing and the loss of urgency. Another risk factor is timing. By the time Wicked, for good releases, the cultural conversation may have moved on. Part 1 benefits from years of anticipation. Part 2 benefits from memory. That's not the same thing. In an era of constant content, audiences rarely sit with a story for a full year waiting for emotional resolution. Streaming, social media, and algorithm-driven entertainment shorten attention spans. By the time For Good arrives, casual viewers may feel no urgency to return. The fans will show up. The question is whether everyone else will. If For Good opens strong and collapses quickly, the industry will call it a flop, even if the core audience is satisfied. So, is Wicked For Good actually a flop? Here's the honest answer. Probably not financially, but very possibly culturally. It risks becoming one of those films that is successful, yet quietly sidelined. No scandals, no disasters, just muted conversation, fewer rewatches, less legacy than expected.
Tonight, I came to go see an early screening of Wicked For Good. Now, I never saw the stage play, so I was really shocked when I liked the first one so much. I really enjoyed the first Wicked. I don't think it's as good as the first one. And actually, for the first hour, I didn't even like it. Like, the first hour of it, I felt like it just lacked the charm of the first one. It lacked the personality. It lacked the heart. It just felt very weird to say about a movie. It just felt very scripted, you know what I mean?
And for a property as iconic as Wicked, that kind of underwhelming reception feels like failure. The irony is that For Good may be the more mature, thoughtful, and faithful adaptation of the two films. But maturity doesn't always translate into mass appeal. Hollywood rewards noise, not nuance. If Wicked, For Good is labeled a flop, it won't be because it was bad. It will be because it asked audiences to sit with consequences instead of applause. And that's a harder sell than flying monkeys and gravity-defying finales.